October 12, 1943, late afternoon, northern Italy. The air smells of damp stone and wood smoke. Somewhere beyond the olive groves, artillery mutters like distant thunder, but here, inside a requisitioned farmhouse, the war feels oddly quiet. Dust floats in narrow beams of autumn sunlight. A cracked window rattles each time a truck passes on the road below. At a rough wooden table sit 3 German officers. Their uniforms are still pressed, their boots still polished. Captured only days ago, they carry themselves not like defeated men, but like guests temporarily inconvenienced. One of them, a major from a Panzer Grenadier regiment, early 40s, iron-gray hair neatly combed, leans back in his chair and smiles thinly as the American interrogator finishes his question. "How long," the American asks, "do you believe your army can continue this fight?" The major chuckles, not nervously, not bitterly, amused. He exchanges a glance with the Oberstleutnant beside him, then answers in careful, accented English. "America," he says, "does not understand war." You can almost feel the confidence radiating from him. This is not bravado. It is certainty, built from years of victories, from Poland to France, from the early months in Russia. He gestures dismissively with 2 fingers. Your soldiers are too comfortable, too well fed. They think war is something to be finished quickly. They will not endure what is coming. The interpreter hesitates, then translates. The words hang in the room. The American captain across the table, clean uniform, notebook in hand, keeps his face neutral. He's heard this before, in Sicily, in Tunisia, always the same assessment. Soft, overfed, undisciplined. Another officer joins in now, a Hauptmann, Luftwaffe liaison, captured when his staff car blundered into an American roadblock outside Salerno. His eyes are sharp, analytical. "You have good equipment," he admits, "plenty of trucks, plenty of fuel, but your men lack the stomach for prolonged hardship. When casualties rise, when winter comes, when the supply lines stretch," he shrugs, "morale will break." Outside, an American truck backfires. The sound echoes off the hills. The major smiles again. "Germany," he says quietly, "has been fighting total war for 4 years. Your country has not yet tasted it." The interrogator closes his notebook. But the Germans keep talking. They talk about American soldiers carrying chocolate instead of extra ammunition, about seeing men complain when rations arrive late, about prisoners captured in Sicily who asked for cigarettes before asking about orders. One officer laughs outright. "They fight well enough," he says, "but they are not hardened. They are not soldiers shaped by necessity. They are civilians in uniform." This sentiment isn't limited to one farmhouse in Italy. Across southern France, in temporary POW cages near Avignon and Marseille, captured German officers repeat the same judgment during questioning. Intelligence summaries pile up with identical phrases. Enemy morale appears brittle. American dependence on logistics will become a liability. Excessive material comforts weaken fighting spirit. German doctrine has always prized endurance over abundance. The Wehrmacht prides itself on operating with less, fewer trucks, fewer rations, fewer replacements, believing hardship forges strength. And from their perspective, the Americans look indulgent. They see troops with fresh uniforms arriving at the front while others rotate out. They hear rumors of ice cream ships in the Mediterranean. They watch medics evacuate wounded aggressively instead of pushing them back into the line. To a German officer forged on the Eastern Front, this looks like weakness. But there is something else happening, something these men don't see yet. Weeks pass. The interrogations end. Prisoners are moved. Some officers are assigned labor details under guard. Others are transported north, closer to the fighting, to temporary holding areas near rail lines and supply routes. And that's when the laughter fades. It begins quietly. A German major of artillery, held near a rail siding outside Florence, is marched under guard to a new compound. As he waits, hands behind his back, he notices movement on the road below. Drugs. At first he barely registers them. Every army has trucks. But these aren't a handful, or a convoy heading to a single unit. They keep coming. 6 by 6, canvas-covered, dust-coated, engines growling in low gear as they climb the grade. Some carry fuel clearly marked, others haul ammunition. Others, impossibly, are filled with replacement troops, helmets bobbing as they bounce over ruts. An hour passes. They don't stop. Another officer joins him at the fence, then another. No one speaks. A guard checks his watch. The column continues. And somewhere deep in the back of the German major's mind, an uncomfortable thought begins to form, small, unwelcome, and impossible to dismiss. Where are they all going, and how many more are there? He has no answer yet. But the road does. By early November 1943, the weather turns against everyone. Rain slicks the roads north of Florence, turning dust into mud and mud into glue. Hillsides sag, olive trees drip, cold seeps into stone and bone alike. This is the seasoned German officers' trust. Weather breaks armies, terrain exposes weakness. Logistics, especially foreign logistics, crack first. At least that is what they have always believed. The prisoners are housed near a rail junction now, a place chosen not for comfort but convenience. Trains pass at all hours. Switch engines clank and hiss in the darkness. Guards complain about the noise. The Germans do not. They watch. From behind barbed wire and wooden posts, officers of the Wehrmacht stand in small knots, collars turned up, hands shoved into pockets. At first they count out of habit, military reflex. 1 train. 2. 3. Flat cars loaded with crates stacked, tarped, numbered. Tank cars rolling through like black serpents, fuel sloshing inside. Boxcars stenciled in English. Some carry ammunition. Others carry spare engines. Others, impossibly, carry entire vehicles broken down and lashed in place like oversized cargo. The schedules make no sense. German logistics officers are trained to read rail traffic the way sailors read currents. This volume should indicate a buildup for a single offensive, a spike, a surge. But the spike never peaks. It just continues. Morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon bleeds into night. Searchlights sweep the yards, steam fogs the air, and still the trains arrive. A lieutenant colonel of logistics, captured near Salerno weeks earlier, frowns as he watches another column of trucks unload near the depot. He turns to the officer beside him. "They must be stripping other fronts," he mutters in German. "North Africa, perhaps, or England." The other man shakes his head slowly. "No," he says. "Look at the markings. The trucks are clean, recently painted, tires unworn. Crews rotate out with mechanical precision. Drivers swap at rest points, engines never cooling long enough to lose heat. This is not scavenged strength. This is depth." On the roads beyond the rail yard, the spectacle grows stranger still. Convoys roll in both directions. Some head north, climbing toward the front, fuel tankers, ammunition carriers, mobile workshops. Others move south, damaged vehicles heading for repair depots, wounded men evacuated in neat rows of ambulances, empty trucks returning without delay. It is a closed loop. A system. German officers are used to seeing columns moving one way, advance or retreat, push or pull. They are not used to seeing both, simultaneously without chaos. One evening, as rain taps against the tin roof of the compound, an Oberst, a regimental commander captured in Sicily, speaks quietly to a group huddled near the fence. "In Russia," he says, We waited weeks for fuel that never came. Divisions stalled because one bridge collapsed, one rail line was cut. He gestures toward the road, where headlights stretch into the distance like a glowing spine. These people repair bridges overnight. No one argues. Another officer, a younger Hauptmann, previously the loudest critic of American softness, has stopped mocking entirely. His eyes track the vehicles with an intensity that borders on fixation. "You see that?" he asks, pointing. A recovery truck hauls a disabled tank forward. Behind it, 3 more tanks follow under their own power. Behind them, a column of trucks. Behind them, another column and another. Destroyed equipment is not disappearing. It is being absorbed. Replaced. German intelligence estimates, carefully compiled over years, said American production would take time to mobilize. That civilian abundance would slow militarization. That distance would cripple supply. Standing here, those assumptions feel theoretical, fragile. One officer removes his gloves, rubs his hands together, and speaks the thought none of them want to voice. "This is not an army," he says. "It is a machine. And machines do not tire." Days later, some prisoners are assigned to work details repairing roads damaged by bombing. Under guard, they stand beside American engineers who lay steel matting, pour gravel, reroute traffic, all while convoys continue to flow around them. There is no pause, no dramatic buildup, no visible strain, just motion, endless, grinding, unstoppable motion. At night, lying on thin cots, the Germans hear engines even in their sleep. A low, constant hum like surf pounding a distant shore. Some dream of it. Others wake convinced they are still counting trucks. One officer, once so confident in interrogation, finally whispers to a guard, in halting English, "How many trucks does your army have?" The guard laughs. "Enough," he says. That answer lingers longer than any insult ever did. Because for the first time since their capture, these men begin to understand something terrifying. You can defeat soldiers. You can outfight divisions. You can even win battles. But how do you defeat a road that never empties? By mid-November 1943, the questions change. No one asks when the Americans will run out anymore. They ask how this is possible. In a makeshift holding area outside Arezzo, a group of senior German officers, men who once commanded divisions, not platoons, sit on ammunition crates during a pause in their work detail. Their boots are caked with mud. Their greatcoats smell of wet wool and diesel fumes. For the first time, they do not talk about tactics. They talk about numbers. A former general staff officer, thin-faced and precise, scratches figures into the dirt with a stick. He has been counting for days now, trucks per hour, trains per night, turnaround time at the depot. "If one convoy passes every 3 minutes," he murmurs, "and each carries conservatively 3 tons." He stops, shakes his head, erases the numbers with his boot. "It exceeds divisional consumption," he says quietly, "by orders of magnitude." Another officer, an artillery colonel with Eastern Front service, scoffs weakly. "They cannot sustain this," he insists, though the words sound rehearsed now hollow. "No nation can." The staff officer looks up at him. "They are not sustaining it," he replies. "They are normalizing it." That distinction lands like a blow. What these men are witnessing is not a surge, not a prelude to exhaustion. It is routine, a baseline. American depots sprawl outward like small cities. Fuel is stored in quantities the Germans once believed suicidal to concentrate. Ammunition stacks are marked, inventoried, rotated. Repair yards hum day and night, welding arcs flashing like distant lightning. Damaged vehicles roll in battered and scorched. Repaired vehicles roll out, sometimes the same day. German doctrine teaches conservation. Make do, Improvise, stretch resources. Here there is no stretching. There is replacement. One afternoon, a group of prisoners is marched past a replacement depot where United States Army personnel are issuing equipment to fresh arrivals. New boots, new webbing, rifles still coated in packing grease. A German major, who once sneered at American softness, watches a private adjust his helmet strap and jog toward a waiting truck. "Where are they from?" the major asks under his breath. "Ohio," says a guard casually. "Kansas, New York." The major blinks. They arrive already trained. Most of them. And if they are lost? The guard shrugs. More come. That night, the German officers argue in whispers. One insists the Americans must be mortgaging their future, burning resources they will regret later. Another counters that the scale suggests the opposite, a nation so deep in material and manpower it can afford inefficiency. That idea is the most frightening of all. On the Eastern Front, German units counted artillery shells. They rationed fuel by the liter. Every loss carried strategic weight. Here, losses seem absorbed. A panzer officer, captured near Salerno, finally admits what he has been circling for weeks. "If we destroy 10 tanks," he says, voice low, "and they replace 12, then victory becomes meaningless." No one responds, because everyone knows he is right. Reports trickle back to German high command through intelligence channels, filtered and cautious. Observations of American supply density, notes about repair capacity, mentions of convoy traffic that appears uninterrupted. In Berlin, analysts read them skeptically. Numbers that large feel exaggerated, prisoner exaggeration, stress. But the men on the ground know better. They have stood beside the road. They have counted until counting became pointless. One evening, as the sun sets blood-red over the hills, a convoy passes so long that dusk turns to full darkness before the last truck disappears. Headlights replace silhouettes. Engines replace birdsong. The road glows. A German lieutenant colonel, once proud of his logistical acumen, grips the fence until his knuckles whiten. "In 1940, he says softly, "we defeated France in weeks by severing her arteries, rail lines, fuel depots, command nodes." He swallows. There are too many arteries now. That is the moment realization hardens into certainty. Germany is not fighting a force that can be starved. It is fighting a system designed to prevent starvation entirely. And systems do not collapse from courage or endurance alone. They collapse only when their inputs fail. Here the inputs seem infinite. The officers fall silent as another train rumbles past, its cars rattling in an endless chain. Some look away, others cannot. Because for the first time since the war began, these men, trained to measure victory in battles and maneuvers, are confronting a truth that no tactical brilliance can undo. The enemy's strength is not at the front. It is behind it. And it is still growing. Late November 1943. Night settles early in the hills south of Bologna. Inside a canvas tent lit by a single shaded lamp, a group of German officers gathers around a borrowed map. It is an American map, crisp, color-coded, laminated against rain. Routes are marked in thick lines, supply points in neat symbols, timetables penciled in the margins. The map should be reassuring. Maps usually are. They impose order. This one does the opposite. A former operations officer, once responsible for planning corps-level movements, traces a finger along a blue line that snakes north. "This route alone," he says, "could sustain an army." He moves his finger to another line, then another. "They have 5, he whispers. No one laughs now, no one scoffs. The mockery of weeks earlier about chocolate bars and clean uniforms feels juvenile, embarrassing, as if spoken by someone else. Outside the tent, American engineers work through the night. You can hear them over the wind, metal clanging, voices calling measurements, a generator coughing to life. A bridge damaged by bombing is being reinforced, not repaired later, not bypassed temporarily. Rebuilt. Now, the Germans watch from behind the wire as steel girders are slotted into place with rehearsed efficiency. Traffic slows for minutes, not hours, minutes. A German oberst who once taught logistics at a staff college exhales slowly. In Russia, he says, this would have halted movement for days. Here it barely registers. Something fundamental is breaking, not morale, not discipline, but comprehension. German doctrine is built on decisive moments, breakthrough, encirclement, collapse. Every plan aims toward a climax. But what do you do when there is no climax? The Americans do not appear to be racing toward a single decisive blow. They are advancing, yes, but methodically, grindingly, with an acceptance of time that feels alien. Every mile forward is layered with redundancy. If a road is cut, another opens. If a bridge falls, another rises. If a unit bleeds, another fills the gap. The Germans begin to understand that delay, their favorite weapon, is useless here. One evening, during a rare lull in traffic, a German major notices something that chills him more than the convoys ever did. American soldiers are resting. Not collapsing, not scrambling, resting. Some lean against trucks, smoking. Others clean weapons. A few laugh softly, writing letters by flashlight. Vehicles idle, engines humming, ready to move again at a moment's notice. This is not exhaustion. This is rhythm. You see, the major murmurs to the man beside him, they are not strained. The realization lands heavy. An army under strain looks tense, brittle, sharp-edged. This one looks sustainable. Word spreads among the prisoners, quietly, reluctantly. Men who once boasted now choose their words carefully. Arguments fade before they start. A panzer officer who once mocked the Sherman as inferior, now admits something he never would have said aloud before. It does not matter if their tank is worse, he says, if there are always more. The arithmetic returns, always the arithmetic. 10 destroyed today. 12 tomorrow. 15 the next week. Loss becomes noise. And with that comes a deeper dread. The enemy is learning while producing. Vehicles are modified, tactics refined, supply routes optimized. The system adapts without slowing. This is not static power. It is accelerating power. Some officers begin to think beyond Italy. They imagine this system turned loose in France, in Germany itself. They picture the Rhine not as a barrier, but as a logistical challenge to be solved. One man finally voices the unthinkable. If they land in the West, he says, and this follows them. He does not finish the sentence. He doesn't have to. Because for the first time, defeat no longer feels like a single disastrous battle. It feels like inevitability, slow, grinding, impersonal. A defeat measured not in days, but in calendars. As December approaches, the prisoners are moved again, north, closer to the front, and with every mile the same sight repeats itself. Roads alive with motion. Rails humming with traffic. Depots multiplying like cells dividing. Germany's war has always been about daring, about speed, shock, and decisive action. America's war, they now see, is about something far more dangerous. Endurance without fragility. Power without panic. A machine that does not need to win quickly, only to keep going. And it will, December 1943. The snow comes early in the Apennines. It clings to branches and helmets, softening the landscape while hardening the ground beneath it. Cold has always been Germany's ally. Frozen roads slow engines. Ice punishes supply lines. Winter, the officers believe, will finally test this American system. But even as temperatures drop near the front, something else grows clearer in the minds of the prisoners. The convoys they see are only the surface. The real enemy is somewhere else. A former general staff planner, now gaunt from weeks of captivity, sits on his bunk one night and speaks to no one in particular. "These trucks," he says quietly, "are shadows." Another officer looks up. "Of what?" "Of factories," he replies. The thought spreads. Every truck implies a plant. Every tank implies an assembly line. Every replacement implies a training pipeline that began months ago. The prisoners begin reconstructing the invisible war behind the visible one. They imagine factories in places they have never seen: Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, names heard only in intelligence briefings. Cities not threatened by artillery, power plants untouched by bombing, rail yards operating without blackout curtains. One officer recalls a pre-war report he once dismissed as propaganda: automobile factories converted to tank production. At the time, he admits, we laughed. No one laughs now. From the camp, they occasionally see American newspapers discarded by guards. Headlines boast about production numbers, not in secret, not hidden, but openly celebrated. Bombers per month, ships launched per week. This, too, unsettles them. German production figures are guarded like state secrets. Here, abundance is advertised. Confidence so complete it does not fear disclosure. A panzer colonel, once fiercely loyal to doctrine, finally speaks the word that has been forming for months. "We misjudged the war," he says. "Not the campaign. The war." Germany prepared for decisive clashes between armies. America prepared for something else entirely: sustained industrial conflict on a global scale. The officers begin to understand why American soldiers rotate out of the line, why wounded are evacuated aggressively, why morale appears high despite casualties. The system is designed to preserve the human element. Men are not expended carelessly, because machines and material take the strain instead. This is the inverse of German practice, where manpower is often substituted for shortages in equipment. Here, equipment substitutes for exhaustion. One snowy morning, a convoy passes with markings the prisoners have not seen before: fresh unit insignia, unfamiliar serial ranges, new divisions. "Where were they?" someone asks. "Training," another answers grimly. "And the ones already here?" "Still training," comes the reply. Because even at the front, the Americans are not finished preparing. The officers realize then that even if Germany somehow stabilized the line, if it held Italy, bled the Allies, delayed invasion, the outcome would not change. Time favors the system that grows stronger by existing. The winter deepens, engines keep running, roads are cleared, rails are repaired faster than they are damaged. There is no crescendo, no dramatic turning point, just continuation. And that, finally, is what breaks them. One night, as snow falls thick and silent, a former Wehrmacht major who once mocked American softness sits awake, listening to engines in the distance. He no longer hears trucks. He hears inevitability. Germany, he understands now, is not fighting men who can be intimidated or worn down. It is fighting a civilization that has converted itself into a weapon. A weapon that does not charge, does not rush, does not panic. It simply advances, slowly, relentlessly. And for the first time since his capture, the major allows himself a thought he once would have considered treasonous. This cannot be stopped. January 1944, before dawn. The snow has stopped, but the cold remains, sharp, metallic, unforgiving. Breath hangs in the air as German prisoners stand in small clusters, stamping their feet for warmth. Somewhere beyond the ridge, artillery thumps, dull and methodical. And down on the road, the convoys move. Headlights cut through the gray half-light. Engines rumble low, steady, unhurried. Trucks crawl past in disciplined intervals, tires crunching over frozen ground that would have immobilized lesser forces. This is supposed to be the breaking point. Winter distance attrition. Instead, the flow is smoother than it was in October. A former Corps intelligence officer watches in silence, his mind no longer racing, no longer calculating. He has already finished the arithmetic. He knows where it leads. "You see," he says softly to no one in particular, "this war was decided before we met them." Another officer turns. "When?" "Not at Kasserine, not at Salerno, not even here." He nods toward the road. "In the years before the war, in the way they prepared to build." The truth is finally clear. Germany's victories were tactical. America's power is structural. You can outmaneuver tactics. You cannot outmaneuver structure. The officers understand now why American command tolerates slow advances and high material expenditure. They are not racing against collapse. They are waiting for the enemy to exhaust himself. And Germany is exhausted. Fuel shortages worsen. Trains are canceled for lack of locomotives. Units at the front fight brilliantly, desperately, but brilliance cannot replace fuel, shells, or fresh men. Across the wire, the Americans rotate another unit forward. The outgoing men look tired, but intact, alive. This, too, is part of the system. A German lieutenant colonel, once a believer in decisive counterstroke, finally articulates the final realization. "We can still win battles," he says, "but we can no longer win the war." No one contradicts him. Because they all feel it now, that quiet, crushing certainty. The knowledge that effort no longer equals progress, that sacrifice no longer shifts the balance. The convoys do not celebrate. They do not pause. They do not even acknowledge the men watching them. They simply continue. Day after day. Week after week. Season after season. And in that continuation lies defeat. Not dramatic. Not sudden. But total. One prisoner looks away as another column passes, unable to watch any longer. Another keeps staring, as if hopping the road will finally empty. It never does. Years later, after the war, some of these men will write memoirs. They will describe battles, retreats, moments of courage and horror. But a few will write about this instead. About the day they realized Germany was no longer fighting soldiers. It was fighting a system that could not be tired, frightened, or outlasted. And by the time they understood that, the war was already over. And